Welcome to Patty's Aquatics. So we've all heard of what a resurrection jar pretty much is that's been made popular by Father Fish. I've highlighted it numerous times on this channel and showed how to do it and how I've done them. But what I want to do today is a little different. What I want to do is make a resurrection tank, a permanent tank that I'm going to put aside and culture those macro and microorganisms permanently within there. And to do that, I had to make a trip down to my local waterway, and I picked up a big old jar of goodness here. So stick around, and I'm going to tell you how I'm going to do it and why I'm going to do it. All right, so this is the big old resurrection jar that I collected yesterday from my local waterway. Took a walk down there, looked around, grabbed this big jar. The main goal of just collecting this. Now, it was pretty cold in my area yesterday, still is today. It was like 25-degree air temperature. The water was very cold. Trust me, my hands were freezing after getting this stuff. But I wanted to wait at least 24 hours because I wanted the water temperature to kind of acclimate to my house temperature here in my fish room, because I knew I was putting it in this tank. Now, this is that 2.5-gallon aquarium that I've had for quite a while. I've used it for different things. It's going to be the permanent tank for my permanent resurrection jar tank. So I knew I wanted the water temperature, like I said, to acclimate to my room temperature, because I'm probably going to have to add some water to this into here. And I didn't want to put warmer water in there and shock anything that might be in here, if that's even possible. But anyway, that's what it is. Now, this jar, full of life already. From the very second I put it up on the shelf, there's stuff swimming all around. You can probably already see, and crawling these little, I don't know what they are. I've seen them in past jars. I believe it's some type of aquatic isopod. It's very cool. Very interesting to be able to see all these different organisms swimming around and crawling around within. Here you see a little wormy thing crawling around within your jars. Now, I keep this thing covered. I have it uncovered right now just because I'm going to be emptying it and to try to get some more light in there. Because if there is any type of larvae that's going to turn into a flying organism, I want it contained within this jar, and I will be covering this tank as well because I don't want that flying around my fish room. So anyhow, so what am I going to do? I'm going to set this tank up. What I want to do first is I want to put some sand in there and a few little plants. And then I'm going to add all of this because I want it to try to be a functioning little ecosystem of a tank like all my other aquariums are. And then after I do that, let me explain a little bit why I'm going to do it. But let me get this camera on a tripod and I'm going to show you setting this tank up. All right, so how are we going to set this up? Now, like I said, I want to put a little bit of sand in this thing to give it a substrate-based level because, like I said, I want this to be long-term. And I want that any type of macroorganisms or microorganisms to have a substrate to be able to bury into or do whatever they would naturally do in the wild. So let me get a little sand in there. Yep, sand on my table. Probably should have used a cup. And I do have a little existing water in there from when I had it set up last. So that's going to be very good too, full of yummy bacterious nutrients. All right. We'll put just a tiny bit more. There's really no specific level I need to fill it to. I just want a good inch or two of sand in there, just so I have a little bit of a base of something for this stuff to be onto. All right, that should be good. Now, as far as plants, I'm not doing anything exotic. I'm really not going to put a lot of different species of plants in here. I'm only really putting one for now. And we'll see how it goes because it's going to be covered majority by these leaves. So I don't know if they're really going to grow that well or not, but I want something in there that's going to be potentially eating any nutrients and excess nutrients that these plants are going to give off as they break down within this aquarium. Now, obviously, these leaves, I will be removing some of them in the future, but I want this to sit for quite a while. And the reason for that being is because I did suffer from a few of my tanks getting infested with planaria worms that did come from my resurrection jars. Now, planaria have their purpose. There is nothing wrong with them in the wild, but within my aquariums, they can be a nuisance, killing shrimp, potentially killing fish, eating fish eggs. And I sell plants here or there. I don't want to sell plants that have potential planaria or planaria eggs on them. So I'm going to be very diligent. Truth be told, I really think I have seen a couple of them in here already. So I will try to remove them over the course of the time being in here. So we'll just have to keep an eye on it. But that's the plants I'm putting in there, just dwarf sage. Just enough to put in the back a little bit. If it starts to grow and start to run, that will have plenty of plant coverage within that little tiny tank. So next up is to get this jar in there. How I'm going to do that, I'm not 100% sure yet, besides just pouring it in. So yeah, we'll just do that and cross our heart here and hope that it doesn't make a big old mess. Try to slowly dump it in. Without creating a big old pocket in the sand I just made in here. But, which I'm sure it just did. So that's going to be dirty. You're not going to be able to see anything for quite a while, I'm sure, to start with, until it settles. This jar was pretty dirty looking too until it settled after a couple hours. So that's not full. I want to get a little bit more water in there. So what I'm going to do is, I could take tap water, but I'm going to siphon some water out of one of my tanks and just top it off. But the tank isn't staying here, so I want to move it to where I'm moving to first before I add more water to it. So let me move it, and then I'll show you everything from there. All right, so I've got that permanent tank on top of my Oscar tank on my rack up above here, next to my 5-gallon that I'm growing out some rice fish in. What I did was I took water from this tank here. I change the water probably once a week in here a little bit, just because it is a bare bottom and I feed it 3 times a week. And I have a high intensity light on here, which I like because it creates a little bit of green water, which feeds the little microorganisms within this tank, which is also food for these guys. So that's why I put it in here. Put in a little tiny bit of a green water tint within this aquarium will also help feed some of those organisms within the water column. It obviously is cloudy now. It will clear up over time, which I will show you some footage of that when that comes. There's things crawling around already. I think this is going to be pretty successful, and it's going to be very interesting watching this through an aquarium instead of a jar, to be honest with you. So why am I doing this? I don't know if I really talked about that yet. The reason being is because I want to observe these long term, not just the 30 days I would keep it in a jar. And I want to make sure, like I mentioned earlier, that if there are any planaria worm in here, that's really the only thing I can think of offhand that I'm going to have an issue of right now at this time of the year. I want to try to remove them as much as I can. And if that truly were planaria I seen earlier, like I said, I want to remove them. And then this being the permanent tank. So what I can do is gradually take this leaf litter out of this aquarium and add it to my other tanks for the food web process. I don't need to go collect new jars every single time. I can just take the leaves out of here, and when they start to get low, I just add leaves to it. Now, that's the big part too, because it's fall right now, and it's the perfect time of year to go collect leaves. And I didn't even have to go down to my local waterway to get them. what I did is just walked out my back door and there are leaves everywhere. I've got a huge bucket full of them that are going to supply me probably for at least the next year. So I don't have to worry again until next fall. So if you're interested in getting some leaves, now is definitely the time to get out there and get them. So that's the purpose of this tank, is to be able to have a long-term culture of organisms, micro and macro, that you're able to soak your leaves into and then use those leaves within your aquariums with that food web process and to continue to feed them. And on top of it, like I said, now I can sit here and observe this better than I would have in a little jar. Be able to see really what's moving around, what's at the top of the water, and see it a lot better and have more viewing area than I would in a jar. So that is the purpose. Now, what we're going to do now is I'm going to let this clear for a few hours. And once it comes back clear, we'll come take a closer look and see really what's all crawling around and swimming around in here more than just these, what I'm thinking are aquatic isopods. But there should be a heck of a lot more because I've seen so many things swimming at the surface in that jar. So we'll come back in a little bit. All right, we are about 24 hours after I set this thing up, and it has cleared up tremendously, and the life has just come out in it. There are tons of these little aquatic isopod things in here. I have seen quite a few little copeds and things darting around back and forth in the surface of the water, and I'm sure there'll be much more life that will come out eventually over time as this thing matures. Um, like I said, I'm really excited to see how this thing does long term. There is quite a bit of leaf litter in here, so I'm hoping it's not too much, but if I do get some cause for concern, I can always remove a little bit of it. I just want to say too that, I know some people are very leery of starting the food web, and I completely get it. I know it's a completely natural thing to be nervous or worried about wanting to throw something like this from the wild into your aquarium, with the fear of contaminating or killing your fish or anything that you have set up in it. But it really is nature. It is something that, in my opinion, it's not something to worry about as long as you do your due diligence, observe those jars, and know what's in them and knowing what you're putting into your aquarium. So if I said for me, like the biggest thing obviously are those planaria for me. I know I'm not going to have any dragonfly nymph or anything like that within these jars. The planaria are the biggest things for me, which are my shrimp killers and egg eaters. And with them as well, everything in these jars have a place in nature. It's all part of a natural ecosystem. They all have their part. Like I said, it's just some things I don't want to be part of my aquarium. So that's just the biggest thing, is really doing that due diligence. And the other thing really is, I feel like these food webs are kind of misunderstood in my opinion. Now, when most people think about the food web basically is just to feed your fish. Well, that's not entirely true. So in my opinion, really, it has much more. It feeds the entire system of this ecosystem we have within our aquariums. The fish may feed off some of these organisms within here, but these organisms also feed off of this dry leaf matter. They feed off the waste within the aquarium. They break that all down, even down to the microorganisms, breaking it down smaller so that it can be worked down into the soil and be food for that soil and food for the plants. So then the plants can grow and thrive and in turn create oxygen for your fish to live and survive. And that cycle can continue. So the food web, in my opinion, is much, much more than just feeding your fish. It's feeding the entire system of these aquariums. And I find that to be hugely beneficial and awesome within an aquarium, and something really to thrive for within these natural ecosystems. It's just finding, like I said, that balance of making sure you know of what you're putting in these aquariums. So like I said, this is the big reason for this aquarium, this resurrection aquarium. I keep wanting to call it a jar, but it is an aquarium. Because I can let it sit for long term. I can see everything that's moving in and out of here, get a better grasp of what's in here besides just being in a little jar and only seeing a little portion here and there. So that'll be a big part of it. So I really hope you enjoy this little journey. I will keep everybody updated, and we'll see how this goes. My plan, obviously, is to over time take some of these leaves out of here and start adding them to my aquariums, and then I can put new leaves in here. And I definitely think it's something people could try, and maybe I can help kind of shine more of a light to the food web for like the positive aspect of it. So that being said, if you're not subscribed to my channel, please consider hitting that subscribe button, and I am offering memberships to my channel. So hit that join button if that interests you and you want to be part of the family. And always remember to think outside the box and take a step back into nature. I hope to see you next time here at Patty's Aquatics.